Excuse me. There, got that out of the way before we went on air.
And we're live.
And everyone heard that.
Yeah, everybody heard that, but that was not me burping, if anybody heard that.
My disgusting niece.
Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, along with Sarah.
Hello.
Data here, hold on.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, what's going on?
I don't know, I'm still on an ad.
Oh, we're back.
Oh,
we're back.
We got it,
I can trim all this stuff off later. I'm gonna trim all this stuff off later, and I'm gonna start again because we're going. Okay. Hi there, guys. Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, along with Sarah.
Hello.
We're doing our fancy broadcast with the encoder, which just means fancy things instead of doing the simple mode in YouTube. And there may be some bumps along the way. I've had a crazy morning, and I am so glad to be sitting here and painting with you guys today. This video is sponsored by jerrysartorama.com. I'll be using the Turner watercolors from them to create this painting right along with you, I hope. And they're Mimic brushes. I'm using both the Mimic Faux Kolinsky and Faux Squirrel. And I also have this scrubber brush. This is also by Creative Mark and available at Jerry's Artorama. And if we need to lighten up some areas, we can use this scrubber to go in and do that. So we might not need it, but it's nice to have it on hand for this because I think we're going to need it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to wet our building, and I've already sketched it on, and there's a link to the reference photo in the video description. So go ahead and grab that. Sarah, can you see our preview or anything on the screen?
It's looking clear, crisp. Colors are great. Great. I haven't noticed it. There's a little bit of a delay, but it's looking good right now.
Excellent, excellent. And if you guys could just hop in and let us know if you can hear us all right. I wanted to try a new microphone today, but it just I just didn't have time to test it this morning. So so please let us know in the comments if you can hear us. So again, we're just wetting the building. And if you're curious, if you're wondering if you have wet the area well enough, also a list of supplies in the video description if you're not sure what colors I'm using, but I will let you know as I apply them. And of course, I'll let you know substitutions in case you don't have the colors I'm using.
Gracie Shack 1.
Hey, Grace!
What kind of watercolor paper and ink pens would you recommend? Thank you for the great tutorials.
Oh boy, well, so many good brands of paper and pens. The one I'm using today, and I'll show you the lid, I'll show you the cover of it, is the Canson Montville. Whoops, sorry about that. And it's very affordable. Like a block of this is probably like a quarter of the price of a block of Arches. Arches being my favorite, but this being a really nice quality paper that's reliable, especially if you're just starting out. And for ink pens, it depends on what you want. If you want like a waterproof ink to use before you watercolor, I like the Micron disposable pens. If you're looking for something that will give you interesting effects as you watercolor and kind of bleed and be kind of cool, I like the it's the Elegant Writer that does some really cool stuff with watercolor once you wet it. But it really just depends on if you want a paint that's going to bleed or is permanent gamboge. And if you don't have this color, you can use Indian Yellow or Cadmium Yellow Deep. Any sort of really warm, bright yellow. And I'm going to apply that. I'm going to imagine that, and I'll show you here, I'm going to imagine the light's coming in from the left-hand side. So it's going to be hitting the left-hand sides of our buildings.
Vayona Nerkuli, apologize. She lives in India, so I'm sure I mispronounced it.
Oh, people from India. Awesome.
We don't have any shops that sell watercolor paper. Are there any websites where you can order the paper?
Well, sure. Well, there's Jerry's, and I think they use a freight forwarding service if you want to order internationally, but that is available. There may be better options in your country. If anybody is from India or knows of a place that ships internationally, could you pop that in the chat so she could know? That would be super, super helpful. It's with different trade restrictions, it's really difficult to recommend anything, but just look for like 140 pound or 300 GSM watercolor paper at the lightest, at the lightest, and you should be pretty good.
Kristen K, what did Lindsay sketch in? Graphite or watercolor pencil?
Graphite. I didn't want my lines to dissolve because I'm going to need that structure. I didn't, on this, I worked on paper that was too small and I didn't have the room around it that I wanted, and I didn't sketch in a detailed design, so I kind of regretted that because I had to kind of approximate it as I put it in, and things were off. It was, I mean, it was fine for a demonstration, just for a practice, but I did it in graphite to make sure that I could actually see my lines when I was done. Now I'm using rose red, and you can use quinacridone rose, you can use permanent rose, you could use opera, you could use alizarin crimson, any sort of pinky red is going to be fine for this. And that's going next to my my yellow, and I'm letting it bleed. I'm not trying to control it or mix it. I'm just want to let it do its own thing on the paper.
Carrie Hare, how do you decide what elements to include from the photo?
Well, you know, the photo is really big if you look at it, and I cropped it to just this building because I really wanted to just kind of have like a skyline or silhouette. So it's just basically what inspires me about the piece. Sometimes I'll use a portion from several photos. It just depends on what I feel like painting.
Connie Felton, Lindsay, I have art bar pastels. Not sure how to use them. Could you give me some ideas?
Art bar. I think those are water soluble. They're like intense blocks, I think. You can use your brush to lift up color just like you would a cake of watercolor paint. And this is phthalo blue, by the way. Or you can color, you can sketch on with them and then use a wet brush to liquefy your colors. Now look how this color's a little too intense on its own, so I'm just putting it like inside the recesses of this building. And then I'm actually going to knock this down with a little bit of the rose red. I'm going to mix it into a purple to kind of tone it down a little bit. So I'm just taking that red. Hopefully that's showing up good on the screen. I feel like I'm flying blind here. I need to figure out a way to monitor my my stuff live.
It's looking good on this end. It's looking very crisp and clear. And
good.
There were a few little trying to adjust, you know, but it was when you had mostly white paper, like you did
yeah.
last week. Catherine 324211. What artist quality and academic level watercolors do you recommend?
I like the Cotmans by Winsor & Newton. I like, you know, the new Prima ones are good, but I don't think they're as good as the Cotmans because they're not as transparent. The Prima ones are very much like the koi pans, which I would definitely recommend the Cotman over the kois. And they're about the same price, or maybe even the Cotmans might even be a little bit less. You can get a set of 12 Cotman colors for about $25. This set of 18 Turner colors is $29, and they're a professional grade. So if you can spend an extra $10, I would go with these. They're linked in the video description. But then again, you have to buy the palette separately. You can get like the half pans of another brand, you know, with that tiny palette that comes with it. It just depends on, so, you know, you're looking at another probably $20, $10 to $20 for a palette, depending on what you want. But I mean, your professional colors are going to last longer. They're going to go further than your student grades because they just have more pigment, so you don't have to use as much of it. And then I want to make a little green, so I'm going to use that phthalo blue, and I'm going to use some of the permanent gamboge. So you just need a touch of the blue. I'll rinse my brush good because I just reset my palette, refilled it the other day, so I know my colors are still fairly wet, so I want to be very careful not to contaminate them.
Alexa Yang, how long does it usually take to paint an average watercolor painting?
Well, everybody's different. There's, I don't think there's like a real formula of how long it should take you. I would say you can lose its freshness after like an hour or so, maybe 2 hours, depends on what you're painting. Now I'm going to use a spray bottle. I'm going to mist it so it can bring some of these colors up into the sky. And this is really going to lighten up this area a lot too. But don't be scared. I did the same thing on the practice piece. I'm going to wet my sky a little bit so I can help that flow. Now, my practice piece, I actually used a piece of Bockingford, which is a 100% cotton paper. And this is I think only 20% cotton. So my colors are going to react differently. They want to slide around a little bit more on the surface. So it'll be kind of a fun experiment to see how the paint behaves. Now I've got some big beads of water there and pigment. So I'm just going to go through and blot that so I don't end up with any blooms.
Let's see. Rodrigo Payas, can I use heavy watercolor paper with alcohol markers?
I wouldn't, because it's so absorbent and it's going to waste your markers. You're better off to use like a smooth cardstock. Now I'm going in with a little bit of turquoise in the Turner line. You can also use cerulean. See that color there? It's not as transparent. It's going to be a little easier to, it's going to be a nice contrast against all these super transparent colors. And that's going to go along in the sky.
Gracie Shack 1, did you say to put in darks before light colors?
I usually do, but it depends on the artist, really. I like to get those values in first before I spend too much time painting. Oh, yeah, but I had allotted myself plenty of time to experiment, so I'm like, well, I'm going to see what I can do with this. I'm going to see what I can make happen. So we're gonna see some places where this painting is really ugly, but we're gonna persevere. Okay, so you can see how we get beyond that and how we pull a painting out when we think it's just kind of completely gone to pot.
Let's see. Encouraging hope, is permanent gamboge different than new gamboge? Gamboge, I'm sorry.
They should be about the same.
Okay.
Maybe maybe old gamboge was fugitive and permanent gamboge is more light fast. I don't know. Now I tap my paper and let that kind of blend together a bit. Now I'm going to tip it around the other way, and I'm going to let the colors whoosh down into the street area. So even though we had tons of color in here, it's actually going to mute out a lot because of all the spraying we're doing. We're diluting that color quite a bit. So again, I'm holding my paper upside down to me. So I've got the sky near me and I'm tilting it so that this paint can flow into the street area. And that's why we want that strong graphite drawing there, so that we can see our lines, because otherwise, if it was watercolor pencil, we wouldn't know what was what, because at this stage it's so blurred out. But I love how the paint just kind of swirls and you get these really interesting patterns and colors. All right, take a look for any blooms. If you have any little puddles, what you want to do is take your brush, rinse it, dry it off, like really, really dry. We're going to make this brush thirsty, and we're going to set it in a puddle like over here and let it drink up that puddle. And that way it'll remove the excess water without messing up any of your colors or without leaving a brush stroke. And I think that's all I have for puddles. I am going to hit this with my heat tool to dry it a little quicker. Now, this would be a great time if you're painting at home and you've got this great big wet canvas or paper. That's a great time to stop, go get a cup of tea, go walk the dog, go stretch your legs, because when you come back to your picture, it often looks a lot different and better, and you've given your mind a little mental break there, so you see how it really looks.
Katrina, where did you get your mimic swirl brushes?
Those are from jerry'sautorama.com. They're an exclusive product at Jerry's. They're available in sets or as single sizes if you have favorites. I have a couple of the sets. I have the value set of the squirrels, which I really like. And then I have some rounds and flats. Actually, yeah, I have some rounds and flats in the Kolinsky, the Mimic Kolinsky.
Gracie Shack 1, would you recommend Inktense blocks if you have the Derwent Inktense pencils?
You know, I think it better. I don't know what I think you said you had a set of 12 of those, Grace, if I'm remembering correctly. I would honestly, I find the pencils a lot more useful than the blocks. The blocks are really fun. I have both full sets, but I really use the pencils a lot more, and I don't really think you need both, quite frankly, unless you just want them because you want them. I mean, then go ahead, get them, but I don't think it's much benefit having both of them.
JPC13 Art, have you tried the water-soluble graphite pencils by Faber-Castell?
I haven't tried theirs specifically, but I have used them before. But I'm a color person, so they've just never been my cup of tea.
Janine's Craft Room, have you tried Crafter's Companion watercolor cardstock, and do you like it?
I have not tried their watercolor cardstock because I have so much watercolor paper that yeah, and a lot of times I find with craft companies when they come out with like watercolor items, they're more of a student grade than an artist grade, but the prices aren't usually as low as student grade from like an art store. So I use a product called Fabriano Studio, and it's available at Jerry's in pads of 50 or 75, and it's about $20 a pad, and you can get 9 by 12 or 11 by 14, and it's a nice smooth watercolor paper that's great for stamping. It's 25% cotton. They have hot press and cold press, and I get the hot press for stamping, and it's wonderful stuff. So that's what I usually use rather than buying like a watercolor cardstock from a stamp manufacturer. Okay, now I think we will work on the buildings. And again, we're going to go back in with the same colors. I'm going to pick up the permanent gamboge and go back in and add my highlights, but this time I'm working on a dry paper, so it's not going all over the place. And we are able to keep our marks where we want them.
Leanne Garrett, hi Lindsay, have you ever tried Dr. P.H. Martin's concentrated watercolor paints? If so, what do you think of them?
I haven't, but I'm going to have to because so many people have asked. I think every show somebody asks about them. And I haven't tried them because I have some student grade liquid watercolors that work for whatever I've used them for, but they probably would fade. So I imagine the Dr. Martens wouldn't.
Alexa Yang, would this painting be any different if you used a different medium?
You could thin down acrylics and use it on paper and not worry about it because it will absorb into the paper a bit. I think that, every medium is going to look a little different. Watercolor is really the only one that's going to give you such a wonderful flow. I'm going in with a little bit of that green I made with the gamboge and the phthalo blue. Just try to keep your colors kind of fresh when you're working here. You don't want mud. Well, go ahead, use whatever color you want. Be careful when you're glazing, and that's what you call it when you make these you layer your colors. Like if you're doing yellow over purple, it's going to want to mud. If you do green over red, it's going to want to go gray. You just got to keep that in mind as you work, that you don't lose the freshness of your pigment. I hope everybody that's with us today is having some nice weather.
We're up to 251 people
Holy
watching
moly,
today.
that is awesome, guys. That's so cool. Thank you.
Katrina, do you use tap water?
I do.
And let's see. Milagro Nieves, have you used M. Graham watercolor?
Oh, yes, they're my favorite, actually.
That's why I asked. I was like, Kali Garrett, can you do more charcoal tutorials?
Yeah, I don't know why I don't tend to work in charcoal very much.
Because watercolor is your favorite medium.
Yeah, I think I'm such a color person. I just love the color. I think that's probably the big part of it. I feel like I want to go a little stronger with my colors here too.
Mariant B. Benoit, I'm colorblind, like black and white, completely colorblind. Do you think I can pull off a painting like this just based off of shades?
Yes, honestly, the values of how light and dark something is so much more important than color. Color is secondary. You can do, like the reference photo from this is all like kind of grayish, greenish tints. It's not color. It doesn't matter what colors you use as long as you get your values right. So absolutely, go for it.
Helen Almond, can we get the pencil sketch? So I'm
Um,
assuming what you traced on with the graphite paper is what she's talking
I
about.
don't have a pencil sketch, but you can trace the photo. You can print out the photo, blow it up, and trace that out. I don't have.
You have a link to the photo on the supply
Yes.
list,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
Exactly.
It's so busy. I'm a little behind. I'm getting caught up on questions.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just so happy to be sitting in the seat. I was so worried. I had my dog at the vet this morning, and she just hadn't been.
Poor Hazel.
Yeah, she hadn't been eating this week, and whoa!
And Karen dumps a water bottle on the floor.
Oh my goodness.
I'll go get a towel.
Oh, don't worry about it. That's
Okay.
It'll be fine for now.
Well, it's headed towards me though. I don't want it to.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, everyone. I'll be back in a minute to finish asking questions. I gotta clean my mess up.
So, anyways, I had my dog at the vet this morning, and I was very nervous because she hadn't been eating, and that's not. She's a golden retriever. They don't like to miss their meals, and she had just and also been a little lethargic and just not acting like herself. And so of course in my mind, I'm convinced that her time has come. Because she's not a young dog, but luckily she just had she has a fever and a little bit of a cold or something. So she's got about 5 different pills she's got to take, but she's gonna be fine. There's nothing serious in blood work or anything.
But no Chewy today. Chewy had to stay home.
Yeah, Chewy had to stay home because she could be contagious. They don't know if she just ate something weird, which is
Possible.
quite possible with that dog, or if she
Any dog.
Yeah, really, yeah, because I don't always go out with her. We live in the country, so I open the door and I let her out, and she goes to the woods and does her business and comes back. And with all the snow thawing out, the vet said probably found a mouse or something and ate it, but just in case.
Half rotten thing on the ground.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So meanwhile, I'm having a panic attack while I'm like, oh my gosh, my dog, and I'm having chest pains. I'm like, oh great, my appendix is rupturing. How am I going to fit a live show and appendicitis and a vet appointment all in one day? I was very upset. So glad to be here.
Niam learns. Lindsay, could you do a tutorial someday on the elegant writer pens?
Yes, I would love to. I bought some because I saw the cool techniques you could do with them, but I haven't really explored them that much. I got them last summer too. I got them when we went down to the stamp show last, and I kind of forgot about them.
Catherine 324211. What do you think about the Tim Holtz distress crayons? Have you tried them?
I haven't. Honestly, I haven't been that impressed on the tutorials I've seen and the demos I've seen with them because they seem to not work as well as gelatos, and I have gelatos and gel sticks, so I'm gonna definitely get some, probably just like the pack of like the brights, just to see how they work. But I really wasn't that impressed with the demos that I was seeing. It just seemed like another product that is so similar to what we already have, and so yeah, I'll get some just to see if they are or not. But probably if you didn't have gelatos, then what's the harm? They're probably very similar. Even though they say they aren't, I know how that completely new product.
Ms. Thrifty50. Hi, Lindsay. How do you keep your colors so fresh and vibrant and not muddy when painting so loose?
I try not to mix them on the palette unless I'm going for a secondary color. I try to let them mix on the paper so that they'll kind of push against each other a little bit as opposed to mixing. And any mixing that's done is done kind of like first generation right there on the paper and not muddying too much. So I'll go in, I'm going to lay in that pink and just let it kind of gray down when it hits the green and get orange when it hits the red. And then I'll put in the mixed purple from the palette in and just kind of let them mingle a little bit.
W. Culpepper, what kind of heat tool are you using? It's so quiet.
It's my friend Nicole gave me. It's the Heat It craft tool. I don't know if it's by Ranger. Do you know who that's by?
I don't remember. I've had mine for so long.
Yeah. But you have that same one, right?
Yeah. Well, I had mine, and then it kind of started to go, and I was like, oh no, I don't know where I'm going to find it. And then I inherited Mom's.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm using the one that she had, and it's still going strong. So I think you can still get them. I don't know. I hope so because I prefer that one over the other ones that are out there.
Yeah, I like my Marvy, and that's what I have downstairs, but it is a lot louder. This is so much nicer for doing a tutorial.
Let's see. Ashley Eaton, what made you pick this picture?
Well, I'd had some people ask for a building, and I'm usually just not that inspired by doing buildings. But for some reason, I saw this, and even though it's kind of like a grainy photo, and it's just a small part of this grainy photo, I was just thinking, oh, I want to do a skyline with some bright colors. It just kind of struck me as something that I could still, it was a building because people had asked for buildings or architecture, but it still had that looseness. I could envision it being a very loose painting.
Crazy Evil Turtle.
That's a great name.
I've been making my own watercolor sketchbooks with Arches paper, but having trouble controlling paint on the opposite side of the page. Any advice?
I'm wondering do you think she means like she's holding the book open and one side of the paint is sliding around? Or
I don't know.
or does she mean the reverse side of the paper?
I think she means the reverse side of the paper.
Gosh, as long as one side is dry, the back side should be able to be painted on without any issue. Maybe the thing is to keep it dry. Maybe you have like a sheet of blotting paper that you can put behind the painting, so or maybe don't paint up to the edge if the paint is running. It'll be a water issue, I think. Making sure that one thing's dry before you work on the back side.
Encouraging Hope. Do you have any tips for how to not lose your buildings at the second part? I get lost when I try to paint detailed watercolors. Any suggestions?
Maybe start with a darker sketch, and that can help you keep your definition.
Tika Carr. I tried using a set of watercolor brushes from Michaels. Whoops, sorry, hit the wrong button. Try that again. Tika Carr. I tried using a set of watercolor brushes from Michaels and found they were stiff, had stray strands, and didn't hold water at all. Just thought I'd mention it to everyone.
It might have been the Artist Loft brand. I haven't heard good things about the Artist Loft brand of products, but I've never used them, so I don't know.
Kelly Joyce Floyd. Lindsay, I just came into some Dollar Rowney 98-pound colored paper. Any suggestions for the best colored pencils to use with it? Any ideas what else I can use this paper for?
Oh boy, there's all kinds of great colored pencils. I like the Color Soft by Derwent. Not everybody does. They're a very soft pencil. Caran d'Ache makes some great colored pencils. Sometimes Prismacolors are really good. I have some older ones that are excellent, but I have noticed some of the newer ones will tend to break. It depends. There's so many good ones. I think maybe wherever you're from, if you can let me know where you're from, I might be able to choose or select ones that might be a little bit better of value. I know the Kohinoor Progresso, I think, are pretty good, and they're pretty affordable.
Gracie Shack 1. What watercolor paintbrushes would you recommend for a beginner at art?
For a beginner, I like these Mimics, but they hold a lot of water, and that's a little problematic for some people, so I would probably recommend the Aqualon by Royal Langnickel or the Majestic. You can find them anywhere brushes are sold, such as Jerry's Artorama or Sponsor, or you probably could find them at your local art store if they carry those. Robert Simmons actually also has like a Simply Simmons for watercolor that's all right. You know, I think I have an Aqualon. I can show you what I like about them if I have one back here. I like the handles. Is this an Aqualon? Yeah, right here. They have these scraper handles on them, which are really nice for like scraping in tree branches and stuff. And since they're a clear handle rather than a wooden handle, if you accidentally leave it in the water, it's not going to swell and crack like these can if you leave them in the water. So you want to be careful anytime you have a wooden handled brush. And I'm going to go down. There's like a little almost looks like I don't know what it is. If it's like that's the only thing about painting from a photo. You don't know exactly what some things are, but it looks like a cement riser or something over here. And I just want to do that in some brighter colors so they stand out. And do some yellow and probably some magenta.
Peyton Valencourt, have you ever had success making prints of your work? If so, how have you gone about doing it? Thank you very much for your time.
I don't do prints to sell just because I just I paint so much and I have so many paintings that I'd rather just kind of sell the originals. That way people have a painting and not just a copy or a piece of paper. But my work's also not in demand enough to really justify doing prints. I think it'd be kind of cool to do postcards or something like that. It's a little bit less, you don't need like to go through the process and the expense of getting a fine art print like you would if you're going to sell prints. You need like to get a giclée print that's going to like stand up just like a painting would as far as like fading and stuff. And I'm unloading my paintings as it is. I don't need to be trying to unload prints too.
The Chatty Crafter, how do I know how much of my watercolor paper contains cotton? I have the Canon XL and just got Strathmore 400.
The Strathmore might have some cotton in it. I don't think the Canson does. It'll tell you. That's something the manufacturers are usually pretty proud of. So it should say on the label, like Montville, Canson Montville, I believe is 25% cotton. I think the same with Fabriano Studio. Then like Arches, Fabriano Artistico, Bockingford, those are all going to be 100% cotton papers. You can also tell by how much you pay for them. The cotton papers are more expensive. All right, so now I'm going to let this kind of sit for a bit, and I'm going to work on some clouds. So what I'm doing here is just bringing clear water over into the sky and just kind of tapping it and twisting my brush as I go. I'm being very loose with these clouds because these are nice organic shapes and I want them to be nice and loose. I'm really splatting that paint on. If I go lower with clouds, I want them a little smaller. Now, since this is a wood pulp mainly paper, it's going to lift up a lot of the color underneath and actually push it around a bit. So it's kind of a fun technique. So, you might prefer a cheaper wood pulp paper to 100% cotton paper. It's completely like personal preference and how you like to paint. But if you find like you're using your paper and it feels like it's really, there's no control in there, it could be because you need a paper that's a little more absorbent, such as a cotton. Now I'm going to take just the straight yellow and I am going to start laying it in the top areas of some of my clouds where the light would be hitting it most.
Rodrigo Paez, a suggestion for a good medium to paint or color on black paper.
I would try pastels or oil pastels. Chalk pastels or oil pastels. And chalk pastels are often referred to as soft pastels. Now, if I've got a lot of blue up here and I want to have a cloud with a lot of yellow, and I'm afraid I'm going to get green, I can actually kind of paint around a little bit and lift up some of that color.
Tim's Woodworking, are there other mediums other than paper that do well with watercolors?
Well, you can get what's called absorbent ground by a company called Daniel Smith. And there might be other companies that make it too. I think Golden might make some. And you can paint that on wood, you can paint that on canvas, and then you can make a surface that will accept watercolor. But you'll need to be careful because it's going to need a protective finish. I wouldn't do it on like a tabletop or something that's going to need to be wiped off, just because it's the binder in watercolor is gum arabic and it's resoluble. So anytime water gets on it again, it's going to turn back into paint. So you definitely need to find a way to seal it if you're going to use it on something like that.
We've had multiple questions about supplies they're using today. So just a reminder to everybody who has questions about what Lindsay's using for colors or brands, it's all listed in her information about the class, and she has links to everything. So you can look and see what she uses and what colors were used specifically, especially, and then she does include the brushes and the paint and the paper and all of that.
Yes, and if you're asking a question and you're not hearing a response, it's probably already been asked. So just check out the replay afterwards, and you'll be able to get all that. Oh, I love when the paint does that, and it just kind of flows.
It's looking fabulous.
Thank you.
Let's see. Christian Villanueva. Hi, I often get lost when I build up on my color layering. Any advice?
To step away. When you honestly though,
no, I hear you.
if you're like I'm doing this all alla prima or all at once because it's a tutorial, but when I painted my sample, there was a few times I'm like, it's not working. I need to go walk the dog, or I need to go make a cup of tea, or I need to go pretend to do my taxes, and and then within a few minutes of pretending to do my taxes, I'm like, nope, I'm going back to that painting.
Ready to go.
But no, just giving your eyes a break, looking at your painting in a mirror, then you can really see what you need. Try to work with the most pure colors you can that are single pigment colors. So I'm working with 4 colors here. They're single pigment, they're artist quality, they don't have fillers, they're going to perform much nicer because with paints, like student grade paints, the big problem with them is that, and I use them from time to time because I teach so many classes, is that they'll have fillers, and that can take down how vibrant they are, because to make these paints less expensive, they just put extenders to make them go further, and that's great for children, or if you're just learning how to mix colors so you don't blow through all your paint when you're practicing. But it does it makes your colors a little more dull, so you just want to, if you can, it's better off to have 3 tubes of beautiful color that is single pigment and vibrant than it is to have a full set of mixes or colors with a lot of extenders, because you can see, look at all the colors we're getting from these four pigments. But yeah, try to keep it simple in what colors you're using, limit your palette, and you'll find a lot of improvement. Plus, you'll be a better artist because you'll learn how to mix your colors.
Joan Odine. Lindsay, I love your haul videos when you show all of the fascinating things you have recently purchased. Isn't it time to do another one for Easter, perhaps?
Oh, I don't have any new things. I need to use the things I have. My goodness.
Mags 131. Ever use Oxgal when painting? How well does it improve flow?
I don't use it. I find that I have plenty of flow with my paints, but it will improve flow. But I've never used it. Sometimes I use gum arabic because that will also do the same and improve transparency and help your paint bond. And I'll use it, like I'll mix it with mica powder or Pearl-Ex or eyeshadow or whatever to give some cool effects. And a little bit of that turquoise blue. I want to have a little bit more of that in the mix. Just be careful when you're adding your colors. Like, make sure you don't add opposites. Like if I get an orange mix, I don't want to add blue on that, or I'm going to have mud. So, if I want to add a little blue, I'll maybe go over where I have a little more purple and layer it up that way, so I can build my layers without ending up with mud. Although a little gray in your clouds is completely fine.
The Chatty Crafter. The Strathmore 400 does not list any info about cotton content, so I guess it has none. So do you stretch paper with no cotton, or is it a hopeless task?
I have. Yeah, I've stretched wood paper, no problem. The Strathmore 400, I tend to buy in blocks, where it's like bound, like this is a block bound on all 4 sides, and I found the Strathmore 400 to perform quite well. And yeah, you can stretch it if it buckles on you. That's probably the best way. I mean, if you want to save money on paper, buy good paper, but buy it in like 90-pound and stretch it, and you'll have the experience of painting on a 300-pound paper, a really expensive paper. But since you're willing to take the time to stretch it, you can save a lot of money.
Catherine 324211. If I want to conduct my own light fast test on my watercolors, approximately how many days or months should I leave them exposed to the sun?
You know what? I don't know. I've never done that. But Marty Owens does it to all the things he tests.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He does.
That's awesome.
He does crazy light fast tests. So go check first, see if he's done a review on that product, and then you don't need to do it because he's already done it. But ask him what he recommends, and he's really good about getting back to his comments on his videos. So I would definitely go check him out and ask.
If the watercolor paint is said to be made with honey, will it dry out enough to put in a palette and not worry about it running everywhere during travel?
Well, the M grams have honey, and they do. I wouldn't tip it on its side. Honestly, I'd keep it flat because they can, if it's a humid area, they could liquefy that much. They're definitely best for lying flat or keeping in your studio. But I mean, they're my favorite. I love them, but that's definitely a limitation. I feel like I want to lighten, maybe break up a little bit and just kind of lighten a little bit there. But I love what the colors do. I think painting clouds is so fun for that. You get to see so many different effects. I think I want something there, maybe a little more yellow. And I'm working, I think this is 11 by 15. And sometimes it's fun to break it up, do a different size, because you got so many different areas you can play with. Well, one part's drying, you can go and fuss with something else so you don't end up fussing with anything too much. Now I want to have something going on in the foreground here, and I'm just going to wet the paper underneath my building.
I love those clouds. Oh,
Thank
so
you.
Pretty.
Thank you.
A couple, Kim Sim 7, how do you stretch watercolor paper?
I have a video on it, but the basis is you soak the paper and then you lay it on a board and you sponge off the excess, and then you use gummed tape, which you can get like at any place that sells, like you can get it at Jerry's. You might be able to get it at your local butcher shop or post office. And then you moisten the tape and you tape it down. And as it dries, the paper becomes, you have the paper stretched. When you have it soaked with water, the paper has expanded as much as it is going to expand. And when you go and as it dries, the tape locks it to the board, and then it becomes really, really tight because it tries to retract back to its smaller state again. And then you end up with this like drum tight paper. But yeah, that's basically the principle of it. It's really wonderful to paint on too.
Mary Wright, I launched my new card line today, Lindsay. Don't want to advertise it, but knew that you would be excited for me and wanted to share my news with you.
Good for you.
Got a lot of tips and tricks from Renee.
Awesome. Are you in Rich Mom University? Let me know in the comments below. I just joined Rich Mom University for the first time.
I'm finally all caught up. So.
Yeah, I just joined Rich Mom University. I'm very excited to get started with that. Renee is awesome. And actually, I'm going to be doing a live show with Renee next month and Amy Schmidauer from Savvy Sexy Social. So that's going to be really great for all of you guys that are doing art businesses to kind of learn from the pros about marketing and social media and all that stuff. That'll be to be announced. I haven't set a date yet, but I've talked to both of them, and they are both excited to be part of it. So
Mary Wright says, I wish. So I'm going to say she's not.
Yeah, it's probably going to be pretty intense. They just it just opened, so I haven't had a chance to get in there yet. It's so amazing how many resources there are now. You know, it used to be you'd have to take, business courses or night classes or something if you wanted this information, and now you can do it from the comfort of your own home. It's really something.
Yeah. It is amazing what the internet allows us to do from the privacy of our own home.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, it doesn't even think, you might think, well, I don't need help, but I started a group with a few DIY YouTubers, and it's just like when you get a place where you can be candid and you can ask questions of other professionals, it's amazing how much you don't know, or perspectives you didn't consider, or it's ideas, just the brainstorming. It's so much easier to create when you have other passionate people around you versus trying to do it in a vacuum. I want to have some green on the ground. So again, I'm mixing up my phthalo blue and my permanent gamboge. And I think I'm actually going to throw in a little bit of that that turquoise, because I want to make sure I have that represented throughout the picture. I was debating whether I wanted to use it at all, because I had started with it and then kind of abandoned it in the example here, but then I really liked the depth of color that it gave, so I wanted to keep it. I didn't want to just leave it out. So I think I'm going to try some that green down here, and I'm tipping my paper quite aggressively. Now here's a trick. If your paint does not want to move, let's put a couple other colors down there just to get it get a little something going here. If your paint is being finicky and it doesn't want to move, clean your brush off, nice fresh water, wet around it, and then you can just touch into the edge and it will help it kind of flow a little bit. Sometimes it happens if you're
Catherine 324211. Have you ever had to deal with a really upset student? No matter how much you tried to help encourage, they still were upset, unsatisfied with the lesson. If so, how did you handle it?
let me think. I'm sure I have. I had a couple of ladies, and I didn't. And it was this crazy class I was doing last year. Just get up and walk away. Just got up and left. And I didn't actually, because it was everyone was just getting used to it. And I don't think they read the class description because it was a very loose watercolor and stamping class. And they're like, "Oh, this just isn't for us." And they got up and left. But I don't know. I think a lot of people kind of know what they're getting themselves into when they take my class. So I haven't had any really upset students. Some people kind of like are very, they feel very inhibited, and I can kind of tell, I can kind of spot that student that's like kind of like usually kind of sitting with their arms crossed, kind of hunched up in their seat. You know they're just, they do not want to look a fool in a class. And sometimes you do, because you're learning. You're not going to be perfect. So, you get that. Sometimes I get the I know more than you do students.
Oh, yeah. Those are probably always good ones.
Yeah.
Older and Dirt. I joined PMP this morning to see what this looked like in the photo. I'm pleasantly amazed at your color interpretation. It's a terrific site, too.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
I haven't been on there yet. I should go on there and look.
I kind of want the ground to feel like wet, like it's wet and it's reflecting, kind of like, after a rain. So I'm streaking my my brush, just kind of pulling some of that paint back and forth, helping it move. Okay. Oh, is this framed up in the monitor well?
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
Great.
It's been a little choppy, like it slows down for a couple seconds and then catches back up. But I don't know if it's just the feed here and it won't be, I don't know.
I know it does get better as it processes, like in a couple hours, because like when the stream first goes off, it'll be like it'll be processed at like 140p, then at 300p, and then at, so the replay does not look good. That's why I've actually started having the set so it will go unlisted. So unless you have the link to this tutorial, you're not going to see it. It's not going to show up in your sub feed. Like if you're not watching it here and you don't know the link, but then like later this afternoon, it'll show up in your sub box and it'll be all processed and lovely. I just want very nondescript area over here because I don't really know. There's actually a big building that would be kind of coming in here blocking the view of this from the reference photo that I have, but I didn't like that, so I am just kind of wetting the area and dropping in some color so there isn't like a definite shape over here. I just kind of want it to fade off into nothing. Your brain will fill in the gaps. We'll make something up. So basically that's what I'm just trying to help it do. And remember, there's ugly stages. Lots of ugly stages in this picture. Don't give up hope.
And if it doesn't turn out right, just cut it up and turn it into bookmarks. Nobody will ever know.
And these would be pretty bookmarks, these colors. Oh my gosh, I kind of want to cut it up into a bookmark and see.
Well, you cut up the sample one.
That's true. I could. Yeah, I could do that. Mm-hmm.
Ian Jackson, what's your PMP? Just got on it this week. You don't have a PMP.
I have an account, just Lindsay Weirich, but I don't post. I will put, like, sometimes I'll post my tutorials that I've done from the photos up there. I don't have any photos up there because I'd be embarrassed to put because I mean, look, these guys are really good that post their photos. I mean, I'll take reference photos for myself, but I wouldn't expect anybody else to paint from them because, like, it'll help me jog my memory of what I wanted to paint, but I don't think they'd be useful to anybody. I'm just not a very good photographer. I took a few at the Common Ground Fair, though. I put them on my website and told anybody they could use them. Maybe I could put those up. I just don't want to add, I don't want to put them up unless they're really good because the photos on there, a lot of them are really good.
Yeah, well, the ones that you've printed off to use have always been really nice.
Yeah, so grateful for that site. So what I'm doing here is I'm throwing in some of my darkest darks, and then I'm going to go around and soften them with some water. So I am I'm putting them on dry paper, but I am keeping that paint pretty juicy, so I'm being pretty generous with it. And then clean my brush. Now I want to show you guys my brush basin. This might be helpful to some of you. I have had this for so many years, and even though you can use like, you know, peanut butter jars or whatever, I like this divided brush basin because I have one side for dirty and one side for clean water. And if I can only have like room for one bucket on my table, it's so nice to have that. And they're not very expensive, but I just, it's kind of silly to go buy a water bucket, but I find that to be so useful, so I thought I would share it. So there, now we have, now you're probably wondering, Lindsay, why are you putting the shadow on the same side of the sun? It's because if the sun's coming in, it's actually hitting the outside of that, and it would be lighting up the inside of this little recess. So the light's actually coming in and lighting up the inside of these. That's why the shadows are on the same side as the sun there, because there's like a, just like an insert there, like it's recessed. So that's why we're having our shadows on the same side of our light, in case anybody's confused.
People are loving the colors in this. Absolutely loving the colors.
Oh, good. I'm trying to, you know, and this is kind of sounds funny because I am a pretty loose painter, but I really love the look of some of these loose watercolor artists, and I'm trying to loosen up and still like keep some of the detail, but I love that free, loose look, and I'm trying to loosen up myself a little bit more. I'm going to do the same thing with these recessed areas down here. So I'm using the phthalo blue, just kicking it back with a little bit of that quinacridone rose or rose red, whatever you have for the red you've been using, because the blue on its own is just almost too strong to use by itself. And we're glazing, we're building up layers. It adds such a lovely depth of color. We have any other familiar faces hanging out with us today?
Well, we've got Kim Sim 7,
love,
Rose Ryan,
cool.
Older and Dirt, a few people in and out as well.
Nice. I might go in and darken those more later, but I'm just going to kind of start. You can always build up more. I wish I made some tea before we started. I was busy cooking the dog her gourmet meals.
She needs her chicken and rice.
She's on the brat diet, or the bland diet. I guess we call it the brat diet for kids because it's bananas, rice, toast or something. Bananas, rice, apples, and toast, but for dogs it's chicken and rice. She's got a pretty rough life.
Well, she is napping right now.
Yeah. She had a rough morning. Do you know how they take her temperature?
I do.
It's very undignified.
Yes, it is undignified.
She was unimpressed.
I'm sure she was. I would be unimpressed.
I would too. Oh, that's so mean, isn't it, Hazel?
Oh, poor Hazel.
Yeah, I want a little of that shadow over here. So once an area is dried, you can go next to it with that contrasting color and not worry about it. Not worry about it running or anything. Oh, and I want a shadow up there too. You know what? I think I'm gonna start switching to my smaller brush. Now that I've gotten like the basic stuff done, I always love to start with that big brush. This is a number 12 round, but these 12 rounds almost seem a little bit bigger, maybe because they're the Mimic Kolinsky and they're just thirstier. I'm gonna switch down to a number 8 round. And this just has such a razor sharp point. If your brush doesn't have a really sharp point, go ahead and use like a 5 and manage it. Now, don't be afraid to turn your paper so that you can get in there and float your color the way you want. So if I'm pointing the sharp point of my brush, towards that shadow, I'm gonna have so much more control than if I tried to like turn my wrist every which way and get in there at an awkward angle. And see, they could float out that nice natural looking shadow.
Mags 131. Do you think squirrel hairbrushes are worth the cost?
These are I don't buy, except for hog brushes because I find they last so much longer and contribute less pollution. I don't buy natural hair brushes. These mimic squirrels are actually synthetic, so they're not as expensive, and I find them to be as nice as any real sable brushes that I've used. So I wouldn't. I think also the squirrel brushes are a lot thirstier than the sable brushes, so sometimes they lack a bit of snap and control. I really wouldn't recommend them for a beginner anyway, just because of that.
Ariana Marie, would you consider keeping a mixed media journal? I've tried and it always looks horrible.
Yeah, I do actually. And it can, you know what? It's supposed to look horrible. It's a journal. It's for you. It's not for anybody else. Nobody else has to see it. If you are using that and you're making a mess, but you are learning and you are enjoying the process, then what's wrong with that? It doesn't have to look perfect. It doesn't have to look pretty at all. It doesn't have to be anything you want to show anybody. And that's probably why you don't see. That's why you don't see my mixed media journal.
Supposed to work out everything in the journal before you put it down on a painting you might want to show somebody.
Exactly. It's a great way to practice.
I mean, I don't have an art journal. I should, but I don't. I'm lazy. That's what it boils down to. I've been wicked lazy. My craft room is such a mess right now.
Oh.
Stuff everywhere. Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
Oh, well, you'll have some rainy day and you'll get in there and
yeah, I will. Yeah.
Somebody just left a comment on the craft room, your craft room redo. You can see Sarah's craft room on there's a video on my channel when we.
Oh really?
Put it
I
together.
thought that would be old news.
Just the other day, somebody had a tip about your rain gutters or your stamp shelves. Somebody was offering some advice. Yeah.
Sweet.
Maybe that would inspire you. Go back and look at the video. I do that sometimes. I'll look at an old like an old craft room tour or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my room was so much cleaner back then, or it was so much less crowded.
Organized.
I know. Mine's not too bad, but boy, it's getting full.
Well, I was finishing up some projects I had on the back burner, and so just kind of that stuff is still out, and I haven't put it away, and I haven't made any cards in like 2 months, and just
You making jewelry now?
I'm sorry?
Are you doing more jewelry now?
Yeah, I've been doing jewelry, and I've had this wooden shutter I want to decorate, and I did that, and then I made some canvases to put up in the living room, and then I had these mason jars that I painted with food coloring and Mod Podge to put outside on the deck for the summer. So it's just like all this stuff I've had for a while, all the materials, and just haven't done.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, you can walk on the floor, but it's kind of an obstacle course.
Oh yeah. Jason goes down to my craft room and he's like, I just can't see any. This is just too much. I don't know where to look.
Yeah, John stuck his head in. He's like, I'm just making sure you didn't buy anything expensive. I'm like, please, even if I did, you wouldn't know the difference. Just stick it in here somewhere.
Have you seen that meme or e-card or something? It says, I'm terrified that when I die, my husband will sell all my craft supplies for what I told him I paid for them.
And that is the truth.
It can add up. Oh my gosh, doing my itemized taxes yesterday, it certainly does add up.
Older and dirt. I think the word journal makes it sound too prim and proper. Hot mess artwork is more my style.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Kristen K, the extent of my crafting in the last month. I made house numbers because we have a new city ordinance. Hey, that's crafty.
Sure.
And probably a lot less expensive than buying actual house numbers.
Yes. And unique. All right, mixing up a little more purple. I feel like I want to darken up the bottom of these here, and I already pre-wet the insides of those, so I'm just gonna go in with that color and just let it flow.
Ian Jackson, before putting all the lovely color into the picture, would it work with a tonal painting under it?
You could do like an ink wash, like India ink, and do all the shading, and then just do like a light watercolor wash over it. It might be a little overwhelming if you had it really dark, and then tried to glaze all this color. You probably, if you're going to do all that work on an ink wash, I wouldn't bother glazing so much color and doing so many layers. But yeah, I mean, that's find your style. Use the techniques that make sense to you, and apply them to your art. There's like, so it looks like some doors further on recessed inside of the columns. So I'm just putting some of those in there. These little domes remind me of the Muppet Show with, like, you know,
dun 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 when they come out in the intro.
Yeah.
It's time to
put on makeup.
It's time to light the lights. Oh man. It's time to get things started. Why don't you just get things started? Okay, wow. It's been a long week. That's all I'm gonna say.
I always like the critics.
Oh yeah, what are their names? I can never remember their names.
Oh shoot!
Two old guys. Not Oswald. What were the two old guys? The Muppets.
Oh, somebody's gonna know it. Somebody will know it. Somebody will pop in the chat and tell us
if they're paying attention.
It's frickin' Frack or something. I don't know.
Oh, Beverly Mossman's here.
Hey, Beverly.
What are the name of the two guys on the Muppet Show that sit up in the balcony and make fun of everybody? What are their names?
Wish I had a prize. I'd give a prize out to whoever the first ones that come.
Whoever enters it first gets a painting. Stadler and Waldorf.
Oh,
yes,
woo! Good job, Kristen K.
You.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally should give her something. I'll have to think of something.
Thank goodness. I'll forget it between now and 20 minutes, but
you could drag down, just like if you put shadows, just pull them down with a damp brush. Since this is dry now, you shouldn't get blooms or anything weird happening, so don't be afraid to give that a try. And while this paint is still damp, I feel like there's too much contrast there. I'm going to drag some of that across in between those columns and just pull them up. A little bit of separation between this bank there and the wall.
Ethel, we're learning about the color wheel with cinnamon. How would Lindsay equate these beautiful colors to the color wheel?
Okay, well, I actually caught some of Cinnamon's broadcast yesterday. I was, again, procrastinating on my taxes, but I did finish them yesterday. That was my goal for the day. That and mop the kitchen floor. I did both. So, yay, I win the day.
You do win the day. And mopping.
I know. So, your magenta, this color here is a cool red, but it's actually magenta is actually more primary than a red because you can actually get a beautiful orange with that. The yellow is a warm yellow, and our blue is a cool blue. But they're also very, very primary, almost like what your printer ink would have, what your printer would have in for ink if it was just a 3-color printer. So, so they're kind of actually neutral, but you think red, yellow, blue, but it's actually cyan, magenta, and yellow when you're looking at true primaries.
Ink lips. I have to say you're doing amazing. How do you get such a loose painting while still keeping the detail?
Well, it's kind of a lot of just kind of having faith that when you're done, it's going to work out. Because I mean, there's so many points in this painting when I was doing the practice that I was like, oh, I don't know. I think I'm gonna bail on this one. But I'm glad I didn't. I was really happy with the way it ultimately turned out. And look at, I mean, it looks very, very random, but look at this technique here. It's gonna look like I have kind of a loose area, but what I want to do is introduce a little blue over here. I like what my painting did in this area because you got this roof here and it's kind of making it more shadowed over here. So I didn't end up with that color on this. example. So what I'm going to do is take some of this turquoise, and I'm just kind of putting it where I want that blue. And it's staying where I want because the paper's dry. And maybe I'll even add a little bit of the phthalo to that as well.
Mags 131. If I covered my house in watercolor paper, could I ask you to paint it like that, Lindsay?
If the price is right. And then I'm just going to take my damp brush, I've wet it, and I'm just blotting it. And then I'm going to float that color out, you know, so I can completely control that. So even though it looks extremely loose, I actually just controlled that technique there. So, you know, you just got to kind of know when to rein it in, I guess.
Know when to walk away.
Yeah. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Oh man, who sang that?
Johnny Cat? No,
No.
Willie. No, shoot. What? The guy with the white hair, Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers.
Is that a Kenny Rogers? I don't know my country.
Yeah, The Gambler. I'm pretty sure it's Kenny Rogers. Willie Nelson might have written it though. He wrote so many songs.
Never been a big country music.
I'm not either, but I like the classics.
The Chatty Crafter. One more paper stretching question. Do I have to paint on the stretched paper while it's on the board, or can I cut it off and use it later?
No, you need to paint it on the board. There's no point stretching it to cut it off. You lose the you'll lose the stretch. It'll warp again.
I only have one board and would like to have some of the cheaper paper stretched and ready to paint when I am. Thanks, Lindsay, for everything you do. I don't know how you get it all done, but I'm very grateful for all your advice and tutorials.
Well, here's I'm gonna drop some advice on you right now. Some good advice too. If you go to like your home improvement store, you can get a product that's called hardboard. They might call it Masonite. That's the brand name, and you can have it cut to the size like of your watercolor paper plus a couple inches, and then you can have plenty of boards. And they get better the more you use them. They get more. They have kind of like a bit of an oil or coating or something, and that gets washed off the more you stretch your paper, and they're just wonderful. And that's what I use. Sometimes you can get them for free, like if you go to a hardware store that sells paneling, you know, like paneling for your walls. They have they discontinue that every once in a while, and they get sample boards. And if you ask if they have any discontinued paneling samples they're getting rid of, they'll give them to you. And the back side of that is that hardboard material. And I have so much of that I use for stretching boards and drawing boards and stuff, and that's free. So
free is good.
Yeah, so it'd probably be more if you have like a local lumber yard, because like my parents had have a lumber yard, and so I got a lot of my boards there, because when they discontinued it, they just had a big bin for free, and anybody could come and take them, use them for their crafts or whatever projects they have. They're small, they're like 18 by 16 or 16 by 20 or somewhere around there. And I mean, when I was a kid, I would just gesso them and I would paint on them. So I mean, they're excellent for stretching your paper.
Excuse me, I'm
Bless
sorry.
you.
Ooh.
But that way you can have a ton of them, and they're not going to take a lot of space. Like stack them up, stretch a bunch on one day, because I do that. I stretch probably like 5 or 6 papers, and then I have them ready to go when I'm ready to paint.
Rovina Leitao, can you use printer paper for art like this?
It doesn't have the sizing. It's not going to hold up to the water. If you're not lifting and if you're not getting your paper too wet, you can do some techniques. But you're not going to want to use it for anything you're going to spend a lot of time on, because it just can't withstand so much abuse, so much, you know, repeated going and painting and adding water and adding paint. It'll buckle and it'll just pill up. The fibers aren't designed for it.
Oscar Lola, can you do a garden project with your sister one day?
A garden project with my sister? Someone must know her. This must be somebody that knows her in real life, because my sister gardens like crazy, and I have a black thumb, so.
Well, no, you've got lovely plants. You've got some lovely plants growing.
That's because I have a husband who knows how to grow things. I have kept my orchid alive.
You have.
That's it.
Yours is flowering. I have an orchid. It's not dying. But it's not flowering either. So you're a step ahead of me.
Yeah, I don't think I have the patience for it. Maybe, I don't know. I had a grand illusion last year that I was going to have a garden, but luckily I came to my senses before it actually became warm enough to plant anything.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a garden and grow my own food.
I remember that.
We almost bought a house when I was when my husband and I were dating, because it had this farm stand. I'm like, oh, I will stay home and I will grow vegetables, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what an awful life that would have been. So you either have it or you don't, I think.
Oh, thanks, Eric. We had several people say God bless you with my
Aw,
sneeze. Thank you.
aw, that's nice. Been blessed.
Susan Carson, which side of Masonite do you paint on?
They're both probably pretty smooth. Just whatever I would actually gesso both sides, at least one side on the back, one coat on the back side. It'll help keep the tension. And yeah, just I do 3 coats. I do a coat, I sand it lightly, do another coat, sand it lightly, and then do the final coat. And it depends. I might not need to sand that final one. I'm just refining some of the shapes of these little windows with my mixed purple. It's just the rose and the phthalo blue.
Rovena Litau, same person as we had a question before, lives in Dubai and they don't get watercolor paper. Any other paper I can use?
Maybe if you have like a mixed media paper, or gosh, I would think they'd have to have something. Oh, you know what? Maybe they have like rice paper, because in Asia they make a lot of rice paper. India is,
Oh yeah, that's a good
yeah,
idea.
I bet you could get like a masa paper. That's wonderful for watercoloring on. MASA. At least that's what it's called in the States. It might be called something different where you are. You could use Sumi e-painting paper, the stuff that the Chinese and Japanese calligraphers use. You can get it in scrolls and like rolls or sheets. Well, maybe you can get it in sheets here. I'm assuming you could probably get them there too. But any of that stuff, rice, any sort of those rice papers that artists use, you'll have a different look. But like masa paper is cool because you can wet it and crinkle it and then paint on it, and you get all these really cool batik type of lines in there. There's an artist, I think her name is Kathy George, that does a lot of that, and she's got some really beautiful examples. She just had an article in the Decorative Painter project in there that was really pretty. A very unique style.
Stacy Decker, do you have any tips for transitioning to an easel from working flat? I keep picking my piece up off the easel. Also, is there a key to choosing the right height? I feel slouched.
Well, you should be able to adjust your easel. You could put your, I don't know what kind of easel you have, but if it's like a table, if it's like a French easel, you could actually take the legs up and put it on your table, and you might be more comfortable that way. I generally work flat at a table for watercolors, but I'll work at an easel for oils and acrylics. And it's basically just getting it comfortable, setting it up, setting it down, figuring out where you want it. I like my paintings to be kind of, I like the middle of my painting to be about shoulder height, how I'm standing, so I'm not slouching. But it's everybody's a little different. If you find like you're getting a pain like in between your shoulder blades, your easel's too low. If you're finding that like that you're hunching your shoulders up, it might be too high. You just gotta find that place where you can relax, figure out where your arm wants to be when you're painting, and then just adjust your easel, the mast height accordingly.
Oh, well, we just had a spammer I blocked. He used some
Ah,
curse words and some bad language. Not very nice.
tisk tisk, you will be banned.
Yeah, I just blocked him, so.
I need to assign more moderators. I think I need to go on there and like make all my regulars moderators
Yeah,
so
I
they
bet
can.
I bet they would be more than happy.
Actually, if you like, I know Kim Sim Seven's usually here, and I think she moderates for Cinnamon. If she wouldn't mind, I'd love to put her in as a moderator.
All right. Let's see if I can get back down.
That's weird. We usually don't get the moderators during the day. That's usually reserved for our nighttime broadcasts.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can get down here. Chat's kind of slowed up a little bit. Here we go.
And what I'm doing here is just painting the detail, just painting those little windows and some of these buildings. You can see from the reference photo where they are.
Ian Jackson, would you add salt for texture to this type of painting?
You could when it's wet, like those first stages if you wanted to. salt is one of those things I kind of feel like it can become a crutch and it's a fun technique. But I think that it can be overused really easily because you kind of get that wow from that technique. So I would just, if you're going to use it, I would kind of pick an area but then you have to wait for it to dry. Then you got to brush the salt off before you work anymore. So anything where I have to wait for things to dry, I tend to shy away from.
Are Bombay inks made in Bombay?
I don't think they are. A good question though. I think they just call it that because they're India inks and probably just to differentiate them from like the Hydrus watercolors.
Noah Murphy. I have a worse black thumb than you guys. Somehow I managed to kill a mother-in-law plant. Yeah, the mother-in-law tongue's a pretty hard plant to kill, Noah. I'm going to agree with you on that. Anyhow,
is that the one that looks like snakes?
Yeah, it's the tall one.
Okay, yeah.
Tall green, yellow, variegated. They are very hard to kill. They actually thrive on neglect. So, Noah, you win the black thumb of the day. He does have a question. How do you get those super thin lines, such as your crosses, on top of the buildings, especially with a thicker round brush?
Well, if you can see the tip, I'm going to put my hand behind that. If you can see the tip of this brush, it's got like a razor sharp tip because it's a high quality brush. This is it's the Mimic Squirrel number 8 round. So this came in the value set, but if you don't want the whole value set, that's the number 8 round. So when I use the brush, I use it straight up and down when I want to get a fine line because then I'm just painting with the tip of the brush. If I want a thicker line, I'm going to use it at an angle and do the whole body of the brush. And that way you can get a lot of different effects from one brush. That's why I like round brushes because I can use it on their side like this, get a nice thick stroke. Or I can use it on its tip and get a tiny little stroke. So it just depends on how I hold the brush and how much pressure I put. And then I'm going to float that shadow out just by wetting it, dampening, blotting my brush and just kind of painting it out. And typically I turn my paper, but I've turned it so much during this demonstration that I thought I'd just leave it be.
Jen Pospichala. I've tried stretching paper twice now, but my tape won't hold. Any tips for keeping it in place?
Well, make sure you're using gummed tape. And the thing is, a lot of times we get our tape too wet and it actually washes the adhesive away. So like if I had just soaked this paper and I laid it on my board, I'd take a sponge and I would blot off all the extra water and blot the water off my board, blot it off my paper. Then I would take the tape and I use another sponge that's damp and I wet it once. Because if you keep wetting over and over with that sponge, you're going to wash your adhesive away. And then I just press it down. And then you can kind of keep an eye on it. If you see it's not bonding, then I would lift it up and I would just take another piece of tape and start again so you don't have to, you know, waste your effort. But that's usually what it is. You have too much water and it's washing the adhesive away. If you find that you just can't seem to get little enough water, you just keep getting too much, try putting the tape on dry and seeing if there's enough water in your paper to grab it. Because I've done both of those methods and they both work pretty well. I feel like I need more shadow on the ground, so I'm going in with water where I want my shadow to flow.
Angel Haney with Derwent Inktense pencils and 140-pound 300-grain watercolor paper. I have had issues using too much water to blend to my liking. I tried your ball floral video, but end up giving up. I'm going back to acrylics. Any suggestion, as I love to sketch, and I felt that watercolors would be my prime medium.
What was her issue again, did you say?
Too much water.
Too much water.
I think.
You know what? If you're using watercolor pencils, like I was in that demo, try using you can get a water-based blending pen instead of a water brush or a damp brush, and that will give you way less water, and it'll be so much easier for you to control. And I think I might have one. I'm going to reach behind me. As soon as I finish putting the shadow in, I'm going to reach behind me and see if I have one handy so I can show you. So I just want to do this before it dries because I'm working with letting the shadows kind of wick down on my paper. I feel like I want a little spritz of water.
Rovina Litau, how do you know that you have a good quality paint?
Well, you can either take the advice of someone who's used it, but if you're not sure, you could also Google reviews. But generally, a good quality watercolor paint will flow. You can see how my paint is flowing here. It'll be nice and vibrant. It will move on the paper. That's the big thing, is it'll move on your paper. It won't just sit in one space, because sometimes that happens with like your lesser quality paints. If it looks vibrant, it's probably a decent quality, because I mean that's kind of hard to fake a vibrant paint.
You can't fake pigment.
Yep.
Danielle Grader, my art bag fell off the table. Baby pulled the bag down with all of my watercolor pencils in it. None of the tips broke. Do you think they will be okay long term?
Well, at least watercolor pencils are not as soft as regular colored pencils, so I don't think you have as much to worry about as if it was like a bag full of Prismacolor pencils. You know, try sharpening one that's dull. If it doesn't break, it's going to be fine. If it does break, then maybe, you know, collect your lead and put it in a palette and use it as a paint.
And Kim Sim 7, Lindsay, we would love to help you moderate.
Thank you.
Because that was some rude language right there. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't get that. We must be, you know what though, that means we must be promoted on the hashtag live channel, the YouTube auto-generated live channel, because otherwise the weirdos can't find us.
Oh, and about the heat tool that we were talking about earlier,
yeah.
Gabby S. Ranger came out with the new black heat tool, so they're still being made. That's good. I'm reassured.
Yes, great. Oh yeah, because the white ones get so grimy looking. I think they decided they were going to do a black one.
Susan Carson, can you staple while stretching?
Yes, you can. If I staple, I usually use stretcher bars, like the kind that that oil painters use, and I just because they're soft, they're like a pine, and then I wrap the paper around just like I was stretching a canvas, and I staple it. But I actually prefer tape. You have to use a lot of staples to get the tension.
And how hard would it be to take the staples out so you didn't tear the paper?
It's kind of rough. Honestly, you probably want to be if you're stapling, you're probably better off to be using a 300-pound paper. I'm turning my work here so I can get some detail on the roof. I'm using my brush straight up and down like I'd mentioned before. I'm just throwing in some kind of curved lines up here to maybe indicate some like rusty drips. How like these old buildings get these rusty drips on them. The same over here. And I think I have a little some architectural details up here that I want to put in. Trying to overdo it, just try to keep it kind of loose.
Rose Ryan, mother-in-law plan is hard to kill. Is that an indictment of mother-in-laws in general? Maybe the right ones. Or the wrong ones.
The wrong ones, yeah, more like it.
I'm lucky. I have a very nice mother-in-law, so that's good.
Yeah, so do I. Your grandmother is my mother-in-law.
Yes. Well, technically, you're my aunt.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Very weird.
Not in a bad way. Connie Felton, Lindsay, have you ever done altered art, and what do you think of it?
I love it. I've done some like cigar box purses and that sort of thing. Like altered books. I like doing altered books. Those are really fun. I haven't done a lot of it lately. I love it because you can use like old stuff. You can recycle cigar boxes and old books and old shoes, old purses, and just make some fun stuff. No, I haven't done much of it, probably because it's quite time consuming, and I haven't had the free time to mess around with too many time consuming things. I tend to jump in and do quicker projects, but yeah, I like it. I think it's fun. Do some, whoops, that's gonna leave a bloom. I feel like I want a little pink at the bottom of this building there. And honestly, you could fuss for days with this. It's so fun to just go in and add touches of color here and there and see what happens.
I think this might be one of my favorites.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow, thank you.
Silver Cox, what will you be painting next time?
I have no idea. So leave your suggestions in the comments below what you'd like to see me paint next week. Because this is for you guys. The show is for you. Okay, I think I want to do some spatters on here. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but I'm going to clean my palette and do the spatters. So basically anything I have out on my palette is fair game. I like it because when it hits a wet area of my paper, it's going to be kind of like blurred out.
Whole day it dried out. How can I get it back?
If it's a regular dye-based pad, you can spray it with a mixture of, what I do is I'll take like a spray bottle like this. This is about a 4-ounce spray bottle, and I'll put about a teaspoon of glycerin in it, and I'll shake it up, and I'll use that to spray my dye-based ink pads that I've left open by mistake overnight. And if it's a solvent-based pad, like a StazOn, then you'll want to use denatured alcohol. And that will, yeah, and sometimes that's better to use than re-inker, like if you know you have plenty of ink in there, because if you just add more re-inker, then it's going to get really gummy. And so if you do the denatured alcohol, you'll get a much better stamped image because you've like over inked it basically. And I switch to my bigger brush, and I want bigger spats. Any place I have an area like, what's going on over here? I don't know what's actually happening over here, so we need to disguise that a little bit. Kind of like if you put on a few pounds over the winter, so you find a swimsuit that's got a little skirt, because it's like, oh, we gotta do something about that. We're gonna disguise that a little bit. That's our old lady swimsuit right there.
Or if you're like me and you're with your friends, you just let it all hang out and don't give two flying seagulls about it.
So that's a great way to deal with it.
Rose Ryan, Lindsay, do you want my address now or later to send me that painting?
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah, people love this. They're loving the colors.
I am so glad.
Sun.
Most importantly, guys, you gonna try it?
Yes.
You guys gonna paint this at home? If you weren't painting along, that's what I love to see.
Shayla Allen, what is the best way to practice light values? I seem to try over and over again, and it's the one thing I still struggle with the most.
Well, your light values are kind of the absence of your dark values. So I would go in and start your painting using the darks. And then when you get confident about getting those darks in, the lights are easy. Well, I think that getting the darks in are like the biggest obstacle, because with watercolor, a lot of times you're trained to work light to dark, and I don't think that's the best way to work. I think you're better off to get those values in right off the bat, and then go in and add your midtones and highlights, because you've already got your lights. Your lights are there because you have white paper if you're watercoloring. It's not the same if you're doing other media, but if you're watercoloring, your lights are already there. So I would say put your darks in. I just love what's happening right here with my wet paper and the flicks. So don't be afraid to experiment. I want a little more yellow over here because the light source is over here. Don't be afraid to let your brush strokes show. It should look like a person had something to do with this.
It's not supposed to look like a photograph.
No.
How do you get these ideas? Rovena Latau. How do you get these ideas?
Honestly, the more you paint, the more ideas you're going to have. Creativity is not like a well and you're going to wear it out. Your well gets deeper the more you create. And I think that is done. How's it look on the monitor?
It looks good.
I'm blind over here.
It was a little spotty today in a couple spots. As far as like it paused and it would catch up with itself, but the picture itself was pretty good all over.
Good. It might be also that computer that you're on, because I've got a good stream over here.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank everybody that came by. Please don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you liked this tutorial, and let me know in the comments after this. After the video goes. After I stop the broadcast, you'll be able to go and refresh the page and leave a comment. Let me know what medium and what type of subject you'd like me to use next time, because the live shows are for you. I want you to be able to ask me questions and really get a lot out of it and learn. So please do that. I want to thank jerrysartorama.com for again sponsoring this video. I have a link to all the supplies I used from Jerry's in the video description, so check that out. And I've been shopping there for years, so you won't have any problems shopping there. They're a fantastic store. And I want to thank Sarah for coming in today.
Hello.
And that's the show for today. Thank you so much for stopping by. And until next time, happy crafting.